All right, we've got about 350 people here, so I will say we'll get started. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to our webinar today. My name's Taylor. I'm an admin coordinator at Community Legal Services. Just some housekeeping reminders for today. The webinar is being recorded. All attendees are muted and cameras are off for the presentation. There's no chat function enabled for attendees, but you can still look in the chat. Our CLS team will be dropping some helpful links and notes as the presentation goes along. And the Q&A is open, so you can submit questions and we will answer them throughout the presentation in the chat. And then there will also be time at the end and we'll answer some questions live. You can also upvote questions by clicking the thumbs up icon next to a question if you see that someone else has already asked the question that you want to ask. We might not get to all of the questions today, but we will send out a follow-up email after the webinar that will have more answers to your questions. Closed captions are available during the webinar, so if you go to the control panel in your Zoom window, which is probably at the bottom, you can click Show Captions, and live captions should appear for you during the presentation. Lastly, after the webinar, we will send out a follow-up email that will include the slides from this presentation, answers to the Q&A, a link to the recording of the full webinar, and a transcript of the webinar. Okay, today we'll be hearing from two attorneys at Community Legal Services, Louise Hayes and Mackenzie Libbey. We also have Tway Ho here with us today who will facilitate our Q&A. And with that, we're going to get right into the presentation, so I'll hand it over to them.
Great. Thanks, Taylor. It's wonderful to see so many people on this webinar who want to help people keep SNAP. These are tough times, and the more people who can help people navigate the system to keep their SNAP, the better. So thank you, all of you. As you know, Congress made sweeping cuts to the SNAP program last July, cutting the program by 20%. And one way they did this is by significantly ramping up SNAP work requirements. As a result, in September, Pennsylvania started requiring that many adults on SNAP work 20 hours a week or show that they are exempt. And if folks don't work or volunteer or go to a training program and they're not exempt, they can only get SNAP for 3 months out of 3 years. That's why we call the SNAP work requirement a time limit. SNAP time limit, SNAP work requirements, they're the same thing. I know I use both terms. We initially expected the first SNAP cutoffs to come on December 1st, 3 months after the time limit started for many people on September 1st. But because of the government shutdown in November, November didn't count as one of someone's 3 months. So the first cutoffs happened on December 31st or January 1st. Pennsylvania's Department of Human Services reports that 59,000 people across Pennsylvania who became subject to the time limit on September 1st were cut off at the end of December. And that's just the first wave. More people will be cut off every month after that. For this webinar, we're not going to go into a lot of detail about the work requirement and exemptions, although we'll go over those quickly. Mostly, we're going to focus on how to help people who have been cut off get their SNAP back. If you want more background on the work requirement and exemptions, we have a very detailed webpage on CLS's website on the work requirement and how people can be exempted or excused from it. The website has a bunch of flyers for people on SNAP, for advocates, for medical providers, and we've got them translated into multiple languages. We did a webinar on this topic that maybe many of you were at back in August. That's also on our website. And we did a Facebook Live aimed at SNAP participants in December. That's also available on our YouTube page, I think. So let's get into it. Next slide, please, Taylor. Taylor? Taylor, we need the next slide. There we go. Thanks. Um, so this is what I basically just said. Starting in September 2025, some adults have to work 20 hours a week to keep their SNAP. And this is people aged 18 to 64. Um, and people without kids under 14 living with them. So parents with kids under 14 are protected. People under 18, people 65 and over are protected. People getting disability benefits are protected. But other than that, you have to show that you're complying with the work requirement or exempt from the work requirement in order to keep your SNAP after 3 months. A lot of people are going to be exempt, and that's one of the key things you all can do for people is help screen for exemptions and help people show that they should be exempt. Mackenzie's going to go over this a little later in this presentation. And again, we've got lots of materials on SNAP exemptions in our on our website. Next page. Next slide. Oh, sorry, Taylor. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the first cutoffs were at the end of December, December 31st is what the slide should say, for people who DHS didn't know whether exempt or working or in job training at least 20 hours a week or volunteering. So a lot of people, that was 2.5 months ago, a lot of people have already been cut off. Next slide, please. So the timing here is complicated and confusing for a lot of people. The first people who were subject to the time limit, which started on September 1st, were people aged 18 to 44 without kids under 18. So they started on September 1st. November didn't count. So those people may have lost their SNAP on January 1st. That's the group where we know that 59,000 people lost their SNAP. For unimportant reasons, DHS was able to protect people between 44 and 54 for another month. So that group, people 44 to 54 without kids under 18, the time limit started for them on October 1st, and so they may have been cut off on February 1st. People aged 55 to 64 and parents of kids 14 or over, these are the people who were newly subject to the time limit by HR 1, the law in July. And those people, the time limit is being implemented at their next renewal starting last November. So if people applied for the first time in November, remember November didn't count, they might be cut off March 1st. Other than that, it depends on when your renewal comes. When your renewal comes due, most people have had renewals every 12 months, and it may be that your renewal was due in December and the time limit is already applying to you. It may be that your renewal won't be due until this coming September, and the time limit won't start running for you until after that. Next slide. Taylor, I think this is just a lag. Next slide. Frustrating for you, Taylor. There we are. People are losing SNAP at the end of their time limit for a variety of reasons. Just as people have always lost SNAP for a variety of reasons. a lot of people just don't know about the work requirement. I know lots of people, including DHS, have put a lot of energy into educating people, but just the word didn't reach everybody. The notices aren't always clear. People may just have trouble understanding them. DHS had these massive mail problems in November, and continues to have, not as bad mail problems as in November when things just didn't get taken to the post office, but mail problems continue to be an issue. Unfortunately, we're hearing people sort of feeling like that SNAP just isn't there for them. They hear that about all these cuts, the November shutdown, when SNAP was so delayed for people. Some people just have sort of given up on SNAP. Hope one thing you can do is to encourage people to stick with it, reapply if need be. There were also major immigrant eligibility changes that are also being rolled out over time, starting in November 2025. We talked about those some in our webinar last August, and we have a lot of flyers about the immigrant eligibility changes on our website as well. Not going to go into that today. And just there are staffing issues at the CAOs. They are short-staffed. They've had a lot of turnover, so new staff. These issues are new to everybody, all of us, and people are going to make mistakes. And the way most of these cases are showing up here at CLS is they're showing up as renewal problems. They aren't necessarily looking like work requirement issues. They're showing up as renewal problems. And we're going to be spending a bunch of time on this webinar explaining why and how you can help people navigate renewals. Next slide. So the key things I'm hoping you all can help with, opportunities for you to help. Talk to the people you work with. Are they getting SNAP? Has their SNAP been cut off? Screen them for exemptions or compliance. Should they be eligible? As I say, I think most people who are being cut off for the time limits probably qualify for one of the exemptions, or they're complying, or they could be complying. And then help them get them back, either through helping them through the renewal process or reapplication or appealing. And again, Mackenzie's going to get into sort of nitty-gritty about how that's going to work. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about SNAP renewals. Historically and typically, they are every 12 months. People have to renew their SNAP, which means they need to reapply, submit a renewal application, either in paper or online on Compass. DHS typically mails these the month before SNAP will end. So if my renewal is due on, my SNAP is due to end on March 31st, they would typically send the renewal packet in mid-February. You have to have an interview at your renewal. And you have to verify, meaning submit paperwork, typically proof of your income. So this would be your most recent 4 weeks of pay stubs. And now, as a result of changes from that HR 1, the big SNAP cut bill and Medicaid cut bill last July, DHS is requiring people to submit proof of their lease or their mortgage and heating bills, which didn't used to be required. And then the CAO has to be able to find all these documents in its computer system and get it right. We often find people say they submitted things and then the caseworkers say, I can't find it. So that's an opportunity. All of these things are opportunities for things to fall through the cracks. Next slide. So the cracks that we see is often the renewal. The CAO says it wasn't received. Possibly, oops, there's a typo there. Even though it was submitted, people may have submitted it and the CAO can't find it, or the client never got the renewal in the mail. So that needs to get in. The interview has to happen, so that's a connection between the SNAP household and the caseworker that has to happen. And then the paperwork, the pay stubs, all of those have to be submitted. And if any of those doesn't work, then the renewal will be rejected and people's SNAP will be cut off. Next slide. Mhm. So this is why we are seeing a lot of people losing their SNAP. It's how frequently do these renewals come? As I say, typically and historically, SNAP renewals are every 12 months. And that's still the case for people who are exempt from the work requirement, complying with the work requirement, or living with people who are not subject to the work requirement, like kids. Um, so those people still have renewals every 12 months. But for single people or more than one person, if people are subject to the work requirement and not coded as exempt or compliant and not living with other people not subject to the work rules, they will have renewals every 3 months. So all that paperwork I just talked about and opportunities for things to fall through the cracks are happening every 3 months. And so somebody who is coded as not compliant, not exempt, they're going to get this renewal and they have to navigate all that renewal stuff. And then they have to show that they're exempt or compliant, because there's a possibility here you could go through all of that and they'll say, you've reached your 3 months time limit. You're not eligible for that reason. But mostly what people are going to see is your renewal sort of failed because the paperwork didn't get in, because of the interview, because we didn't get your renewal form at all. So the cutoff notices will say renewal problem rather than work requirement problem. Next slide. So how can you help somebody whose SNAP is off? Um, you're going to be helping them to complete that renewal if it's recent enough, or reapply. Or in some cases, you're going to be appealing the cutoff. But CLS, I've spent decades telling people, appeal all the cutoffs, appeal, appeal, appeal. But in these cases, if the problem is a renewal, appealing won't be enough. The CAO cannot reopen that case without that renewal or a new application. So helping people to renew or reapply is the sort of key step that has to happen here. And then show that the person is exempt or complying with the work requirement. Next slide. And I think this is where I hand things over to Mackenzie. We'll know when we can see the next slide.
And I think it will appear in 10 to 20 seconds. So I will introduce myself while we wait for that. Thank you so much, Louise. My name is Mackenzie. I am a staff attorney in the Health and Independence Unit at Community Legal Services. And I'm going to be, as Louise said, getting into the nitty-gritty about how to handle these work requirement related cutoffs. So Louise has talked a little bit about the different certification periods for people who are subject to work requirements. And really the first step that you're going to take when you're helping these folks will vary depending on which certification period they're in, which of those groups they're in. If you are helping someone who is a household of one or lives with other people who are subject to work requirements, are not complying, not exempt, and they have been cut off at renewal. They had a renewal after their 3 months of time-limited benefits ran out. The primary thing you are going to be doing is helping them finish the renewal, make sure the renewal is complete. That might mean getting the actual renewal packet in, submitting verification if there's outstanding verification that's needed, or resubmitting it, making sure that the interview happens, and then, of course, notifying the county assistance office of that person's exemption from or compliance with work requirements and providing any verification. One note about these renewal cases, if someone is cut off, let's say at the end of February, and you help them reapply or submit a renewal within 30 days, so sometime in March, and that person has submitted proof of their exemption, or they have submitted paperwork showing that they are complying with work requirements, it is possible to help that person get back benefits from the date that their case was closed. Typically after, and generally after a certification period ends, it's just not possible to get continuing benefits, which we'll talk a little bit more about when I talk about people who get cut off during a certification period. But if that person submits a renewal or reapplies within 30 days of benefit closure and can show that they had provided the information to show that they were exempt or complying before they got cut off, there is a possibility of getting them back benefits. Otherwise, their benefits will restart once they've completed the renewal process. For people who are cut off during a certification period, so these would be people who are in a household with maybe someone who's not subject to work requirements, someone who's complying or exempt from work requirements. They will be cut off not with the renewal, but with an advance notice. This notice will say something like, this person is no longer eligible because they are not complying with work requirements, and it will let the household know how their benefit amount is going to change based on that removal, or the fact that that person has become an ineligible household member. With these advance notices, if you help the person appeal, which that is sort of the next step here for people who are cut off during the certification period, ideally you would help them appeal within 15 days of that notice. That would entitle them to continuing benefits while the appeal is being resolved. But you can help people appeal up to 90 days after the date on the notice. It does take some time for hearings to get scheduled in these cases, and the idea is that you're working to resolve the issue while you're in that sort of waiting period. So that will look like, again, showing that the person is exempt, providing any verification if it's necessary, or showing that they're complying or helping them get into compliance. Next slide, please, Taylor. I would just start talking about my next slide, but it's a visual. Now the anticipation is building. Okay, I'll tell you what it's going to show. It's going to show the fair hearing form that comes with these advance notices. Many of you have probably seen this, so maybe not even necessary for me to show a screenshot of it, but once it appears, you will see the fair hearing form. It's very simple. The information you have to fill in: name, case number, phone number, address, which program you're appealing. And Taylor, if you didn't catch it, next slide, but I'm thinking this is just the delay on your end. And then question number 3, there we go. says, do you want your SNAP benefits to continue at the same amount pending the hearing decision? This is the box you would check off if this person wants their benefits to continue while they await a hearing decision. And then you just choose which kind of hearing you want, if you need an interpreter. And next slide, please, Taylor. Okay, I can't handle a comfortable silence. So I will say that the next slide shows the second half of the fair hearing form. And yes, great. Number 7, we've just highlighted here. This is where you would write in why this person is exempt or how they are complying with work requirements. Basically, again, why you disagree with the county assistance office's decision. Next slide, Taylor. And I'll start talking about it before we get there, not a visual on this one. Louise touched on this just a bit, but if we are helping someone with a renewal as opposed to an appeal, there are some things that we generally talk about and sort of go through as we're troubleshooting these cases with people. So the first one is just figuring out what paperwork the person has. Do they have the cutoff notice? Did they get the renewal form? Did they submit the renewal form? That gives you a sense of timelines and sort of what's happened on the case, what verification might have been requested. Depending on how much information you can get from the person you're helping and their paperwork, you may need to call the customer service center. So that first number, the 877 number, is the statewide number, and then the second one beginning with 215 is a Philadelphia specific number. And typically the reps at the customer service center can explain pretty detailed, in a pretty detailed way what the issue was. So for example, they might just say, we never received the renewal packet, even though your client dropped it off or sent it in somehow. They might say there's missing verification, paperwork not submitted, or maybe an interview was missed. So this will give you sort of your action items as far as what to help your client complete, in addition to helping them report their compliance or their exemption. Next slide, Taylor. And I'll just start by saying that if you are in Philadelphia and you are helping people with SNAP cases, SNAP appeals, navigating work requirements, you can become a PCAO partner. And there's Mary Pat's email. You can do that by emailing Mary Pat Pileggi. And through being a part of that group, you will get a list of liaisons or managers in each office that you can communicate with about your clients and any issues they may be having. So you can email them. Maybe if you don't get complete information from the customer service center, you get information that your client doesn't think makes sense based on what they have submitted or not submitted. You can email these people at your client's specific county assistance office and try to figure out what has happened. You can also submit documentation to them and also, again, let them know about any exemptions or compliance on behalf of your client. If you're outside of Philadelphia, I imagine many of you already have relationships with your local county assistance offices. Maybe they'll give you a liaison. I'm not sure, how other county assistance offices outside of Philadelphia handle these kind of inquiries, but I would imagine that even if you don't have a formal liaison, there's someone in the offices that you work with frequently who tends to be responsive and helpful. So working with that person makes sense. And of course, if you're helping someone, the issue becomes very complicated or it's beyond your capacity as an organization, you can always refer the person to their local legal services program, or if you're in Philadelphia, to CLS. Next slide, Taylor. All right. So we have this as step 2. I don't know that it's so helpful to think of it in terms of steps, because I think before you're helping someone appeal or renew, you're probably having a conversation with them about whether they might be exempt from work requirements or complying with work requirements. But you may think of it this way. You're first helping that person renew or appeal. And in that process, or once you've started that process, then you're communicating with the county assistance office about their exemptions or compliance with the work requirement. So here's a list of exemptions from the work requirement. I feel like probably many of you have seen this list or some version of it many times, but definitely worth running through with the person you're speaking to. They might, again, as Louise said, not think they qualify for an exemption, only have heard about the medical exemption and think they don't qualify based on that, but not be aware of others. So having like a complete conversation with your client, going through each of the exemptions, and seeing if any of them apply to the person you're working with is important. This list of exemptions, the first two at the top here, so the exemption based on earning at least $217.50 a week or working at least 30 hours a week, and the exemption based on having a health condition that makes it hard to work, require proof. So in the case of earnings or work, that would be like pay stubs, a letter from your employer. In the case of having a health condition, the PA 1921 form is what you would use. And Taylor, you can go to the next slide, please, so I can show that form if people haven't seen it. The rest of these exemptions, oh wow, I see you were speedier than I thought. The rest of the exemptions on that list of the non-yellow, non-bolded ones only require verification if questionable. So in many cases, if someone is claiming one of those exemptions, all that is required is that they report that exemption to the county assistance office. If the county assistance office deems it questionable, they may ask for additional verification, but additional verification is not required right off the bat. Okay, this is the SNAP medical exemption form. Many of you have probably seen this. The person you're helping, their name would go on top, their date of birth, and then they would have to have a medical provider fill out this bottom portion and the box, specifically the answer to question number 1. Does this individual have a mental or physical condition? Check yes, specify the condition, and sign the form. This form can be signed by a wide variety of providers. It does not have to be signed by a doctor. It can be signed by a nurse practitioner, physician's assistant, social worker. So don't let that be a barrier for folks. Next slide, Taylor. Okay, reporting exemptions. So I just mentioned some exemptions only have to be reported. There's not any required verification for those exemptions. And there are a few ways that you can help folks do that. One way is that if they still need to have their renewal interview, or they have had their renewal interview, these exemptions should be discussed with them by their caseworker. If they've reached their 3-month time-limited SNAP time limit, I guess, they will have this renewal process, and part of the renewal process is meant to identify if people have exemptions that may allow them to continue receiving SNAP. So that is the first way that someone can report an exemption during their SNAP interview. Even if the person interviewing them doesn't ask about exemptions, although they should, that is a time for the person to offer this information to the county assistance office and report it. The information about someone's exemption can be uploaded to Compass. And also CLS has this nifty screening tool on our website that creates a PDF, like a completed PDF version of DHS's exemption screening form. And I'm sure these slides will be sent around after the presentation, so you'll have the link there, and probably Tway or someone is putting it in the chat as we speak. Next slide, Taylor. This is the exemption screening form. This was sent out over the summer to folks, late summer, early fall, who were going to start being subject to the time limit. This form, again, is what's generated if you fill out CLS's online screening tool, and it will have the appropriate answer circled yes with the person's information, case number, things like that. And that can be, again, uploaded to Compass, turned in person at the county assistant's office. Or you can send it in to the county assistant's office on behalf of your client. Next slide, Taylor. Okay. The next option for folks who are trying to keep their SNAP, but perhaps you've gone through that full list of exemptions with them and none of them apply, is for them to comply with the work rules. So if they're not exempt, but they've used up their 3 months, then they would need to be working or in a job training for 20 hours a week or some combination of those two things. People can also volunteer to meet work rules, and we recommend that people talk to their caseworker at the CAO about that option because the hours requirements will vary. It's not 20 hours like job training or work. And the CAO can refer you to a job training program if you ask. And I know that we at CLS have had some luck with clients getting referred to those programs and being able to get their benefits reopened. So that that is an option for people. Again, just emphasizing that the work can be paid or unpaid, informal, formal, as long as the person you're working with is able to provide verification of the hours. And then, of course, help the person tell the county assistant's office what they are doing. So if they already have some kind of work or job training or volunteering that they're interested in, that's great. If not, talking to their caseworker and finding out how they can get referred to a job program would be the next step there. Next slide, Taylor. Okay. So assuming that you have appealed the cutoff of someone's benefits, someone who lives with people who are not subject to work requirements, and they get that advance notice, you appeal, you get in information about their exemption or compliance, the county assistant's office says, received, this person's benefits are reopened, they send you a beautiful eligibility notice saying the person's benefits have reopened, you can withdraw your appeal. And that's what you should do. There's no longer an issue if they've reopened the person's benefits. So again, you've taken advantage of that time frame between when you filed the appeal and when a hearing is scheduled to resolve the issue, and you no longer need the appeal. So I always request a copy of the PA 162, I think is what the number is, the eligibility notice, just to have something firmly in writing in these cases before I withdraw the appeal. But that is the next and final step there. If you've helped someone with a renewal, again, the eligibility notice would be the thing that lets you know the issue is resolved, their benefits are back on. There's no appeal to withdraw in those cases, although if you're helping someone with a renewal and requesting reconsideration, I should have said, you can still appeal. Doesn't preclude you from appealing. But generally, it just makes the most sense to help the person with the renewal. And yeah, that's it. Taylor, next slide. Okay, these are the resources that we've talked about during the first part of the training, and I believe most of them have been dropped into the chat. This first one is our very detailed website page on all of the changes to SNAP that we've been discussing today and more. The second is our toolkit. So this has like both SNAP recipient facing materials and advocate facing materials, as well as like social media, flyers, things like that. And then DHS, of course, has a page on work requirements with a lot of this information as well. And I believe the next slide just says questions, question mark. So Taylor, you can change it, but also I'll open it up for questions. Thank you all so much.
Okay. We had a couple. Thank you all for your questions through the Q&A. We flagged some questions that we thought would be useful to have our presenters address afterwards here. So first question, we'll ask Louise first. With the exemptions, what documents have been working for you to prove a medical condition limiting work? Any recommendations? And Louise, I think you're muted.
Thanks. So the key document is that PA 1921 medical exemption form that DHS issued, and I think Mackenzie showed you. That's the key way to establish a medical exemption. The SNAP handbook does say that other medical evidence might work, but the key question is medical evidence doesn't necessarily show that that the medical condition reduces someone's ability to work. So I think the CAO has some issues with that. I have had a case where somebody is applying for SSI and they've had a consultative exam as part of the SSI process, and they're a trained professional psychologist says this person's medical condition reduces their ability to work, and that worked. But we can't count on just medical evidence alone because they're going to want the doctor to be saying that the medical condition reduces somebody's ability to work.
Louise. Another question. Send this to Mackenzie. For people who have reached 3-month time limit because they haven't complied with the work requirements, will they just get a general renewal packet in the mail? Will they not necessarily be told that they need to meet the new work requirement?
That is a good question. So someone who's been subject to the work requirement and is getting toward using up their 3 months should have received some notice at some point in the form of one notice saying you are now subject to the SNAP work requirement, and another notice saying, I don't remember exactly, and Louise, you can jump in if you know which month it comes, but basically saying you are close to using up your 3 months of time limited benefits. Maybe it comes in the second month.
I'm not so confident that there is such a thing.
Okay, there's at least one notice of someone being subject to this time limit, but it comes separately from the renewal. And the renewal will just look like a renewal, and it might be confusing to people because they might think, well, I just renewed, a few months ago, or I normally renew in this particular month, and this doesn't align with what I expected. So yes, that will cause confusion for folks. I don't think that the renewal necessarily has any specific indicator that it is because you're subject to the time limit. If someone has seen one that does or thinks differently, please jump in. But I think it just looks like a regular renewal, which is why a lot of these issues are showing up as just plain renewal issues.
Mackenzie. Another question. We'll send this back to you, Mackenzie, as Louise is answering another question in the chat. But regarding formal/informal, paid and unpaid work, counting to meet the work hour requirement, what kind of proof is needed to prove informal or unpaid work hours?
Yeah, so the CAO is not supposed to only accept one specific kind of verification. So they can't say, oh, you don't have pay stubs, we're not accepting this. A letter in a case like that probably would make sense. A letter from the person for whom you're working that says how many hours you're working, maybe when you started doing the work, and their contact information is I think a good place to start. The CAO will certainly let you know if that is not sufficient, and then it's back to the drawing board. But normally a letter is considered acceptable verification. But again, these work requirement new rules are new for us. So verifying, I'm talking about verifying like informal work outside of the context of work requirements. I don't know if the county assistance offices will treat these cases differently than others we've dealt with in the past, but that is what has worked for us in the past.
Thanks, Mackenzie. For Louise, a question in the chat just came. Any learning so far for folks proving compliance through volunteer hours with a nonprofit? Our organization would like to support people by offering volunteer opportunities. We would appreciate any advice for navigating this process.
Good question, and so appreciate your organization's desire to help. Can't emphasize enough that the sort of key thing to do that we hope nonprofits will do is help screen for exemptions. Just if people want to volunteer with you, that's great, but an exemption is good for a year, and they can still volunteer for you if they want, but volunteering would have to be week in and week out, and just maybe hard to sustain. So I do hope that nonprofits that want to help people keep their SNAP will focus on screening people for exemptions. That said, if people aren't exempt and want to volunteer with you, there's a form. It's on CLS's website, DHS's website. I'm trying to remember the number of it, 1845 or something. A form for volunteer organizations to fill out saying this person is going to be volunteering with us. And if the nonprofit fills out that form, that's good for 6 months. The nonprofit is committing to reporting to the CAO if the person stops showing up.
Thanks, Louise. So the last question so far in the chat, and I'll send it right back to you, Louise. What do you think? Can elected officials expedite or resolve issues with SNAP or Medicaid, or not really? What are your thoughts?
I'd be interested in the thoughts of the elected officials. I think they, many of them have constituent services reps who work really hard to help people get on and have a lot of experience doing this. I don't know whether DHS is more responsive to them than to other people. So there's certainly one avenue. Again, legal services, this is what we do. If you're in Philadelphia, folks can come to us. Outside of Philly, there's legal services programs all over the state. But elected officials do have wonderful staff doing great work that we're grateful for.
Thanks, Louise. Well, those are all the current questions. Oh, we say that and 2 more pop in. So let's just answer them live here. If someone has been cut off due to compliance, and then they get a job that would meet the work requirements, does the CAO need to see 30 days of pay stubs or proof of compliance before reinstating SNAP benefits, or could they be reinstated sooner? We'll pass this off to Mackenzie.
No, if someone starts complying with the work requirement, they should let the county assistance office know as soon as possible. They'll need to provide some proof of income when the job started, but no, I don't think that they'll need 30 days of someone's income verification.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Louise, what happens when SNAP benefits are stolen?
That's a heartbreaking question. Until December 2020, theft of SNAP through what's called skimming is a terrible nationwide problem. International organized criminals are taking advantage of the fact that SNAP cards don't have chips on them. They're still using technology from the 1990s, swipe cards. So international organized criminals have figured out that they can put skimming devices on SNAP machines, get people's card number and PIN that way, and steal people's SNAP. It's a nationwide problem. Congress authorized states to reimburse people whose benefits were stolen, recognizing that it's not their fault that these cards have 1990s technology on this. And Congress allowed that reimbursement authority to end in December 2024. So since then, there has been no mechanism for getting stolen SNAP benefits replaced. It's utterly terrible. The solution here is to put chips on cards, the same kind of security that's protecting debit cards and credit cards. And DHS, Pennsylvania has to do that. It costs money. So Mackenzie did heroic work last year trying to get that in last year's budget. It would be great if it's in this year's budget. This is going to be a particularly hard year. But Mackenzie, anything more you want to add?
No, I think you've covered it. Thanks, Louise.
Thanks, Louise. There was some earlier questions, many earlier questions, which participants can see through the Q&A answered section. But one question that came in previously that I think could be useful to highlight now. I'll ask Mackenzie, but if someone was originally complying with the SNAP work requirements, and then later before their 6-month annual renewal, they lose their hours or lose their job, do they have to notify the CAO? Would the CAO find out? What are your thoughts?
Yes. So part of the reason that we have been talking a lot about exemptions and treating exemptions as sort of the primary way to help people with maintaining their SNAP is that if someone is complying rather than exempt, they have an obligation to report within 10 days if their hours drop below the required amount. So yes, the person would need to report that change, and the county assistance office has a lot of ways of finding out about people's jobs and income and things. So even if it's not reported, the county assistance office might identify it on their own. And if it's reported, then yeah, your time limited benefits would start. If you are exempt, even if you're working, so for example, if you meet one of those exemptions, let's say like you're working informally or you're working not that many hours, or you're worried about your hours kind of ebbing and flowing up above and under 20 hours per week, but you qualify for a medical exemption and you get that form in to the county assistance office, then even as your hours kind of fluctuate, you don't have those same reporting requirements because you're exempt from the work rules based on the medical condition. So yes, you would need to report if your hours change or you lose your job. Yes, the county assistance office probably could find out on their own, which is why I try to get an exemption if you may qualify for an exemption, even if you are working, and especially if you're working a job with fluctuating or unpredictable hours.
Thanks, Mackenzie. A common question throughout today's webinar involves people who have a disability but are not on disability, are not receiving disability benefits. We'll ask Louise, so someone who has a disability but is not currently on disability benefits, are they still able to keep their SNAP? I hope that makes sense. Can you discuss the difference between the disability benefit exemption as well as the medical condition exemption again?
So if you are getting disability benefits, and that's any disability-related Medicaid, SSI, Social Security disability, VA benefits, then you're exempt. But also if you are trying to get the disability benefits, if you aren't yet getting them, then the medical condition form is probably the way to go. If you don't meet any other exemption, getting that medical condition form signed by your medical provider will keep your SNAP, get you exempt. The medical condition form, the standard is, do you have a medical condition that reduces your ability to work? A lot of people have medical conditions that reduce their ability to work.
Thanks, Louise. We're running out of time, but I think Dana had a question about when are these forms coming and when are they due? I'm not quite sure what form specifically Dana might be referencing, but maybe Mackenzie can just talk about like when are exempt, like when can someone submit exemption information to the CAO again and how?
Yeah, someone can submit exemption information before they come up for renewal or after they come up for renewal. One thing to note, since I don't totally understand which forms we're talking about, I will just use this as an opportunity to say something I should have said earlier in the presentation. If someone has submitted an exemption or proof of an exemption or reported an exemption after their renewal got sent out. So let's say they've used 2 months of their time limited benefits, the renewal gets sent out, and somehow their exemption form and the renewal kind of cross paths in the mail. So they've told the county assistance office, they might think, oh, I don't need to do a renewal. I told them I was exempt. If the renewal has been mailed out, even if the person has told the county assistance office they're exempt, they still need to complete the renewal. So that might be confusing to people too. Even if they've reported an exemption during this 3-month time limited period, if the renewal has been mailed, it's got to be filled out and returned, and the renewal process has to be completed. And typically the renewal is sent out, like Louise said, the month before benefits are set to end. So if someone's benefits were going to end at the end of April, it would come in March.
Thank you.
Tway, I saw a question and then it seemed to have disappeared. Maybe I just can't find it, about whether people should lock their cards to prevent skimming using the Propel tool. Yes, a good idea to use that either through Propel or it's called EBT Connect, I think is DHS's website for locking your card. If you can do that, it's a good thing.
Thanks, Louise. We'll end with this last question. Just in case Dana's question about the forms involved, maybe the form is a notice of SNAP termination. Mackenzie, could you talk about when any kind of appeal form is due in case someone wants to appeal a adverse SNAP decision, like a termination?
Sure. So if someone gets an advance notice saying this person in your household is no longer eligible, your benefits are changing, they have 15 days from the date on the notice to appeal and request continuing benefits while the appeal is being resolved. They have 90 days in general to appeal the decision, but if you're past that 15-day point, you can't request continuing benefits. If someone is cut off at renewal, they can request that the county assistance office basically reconsider or reopen their case rather than having to do a whole new application if they reapply or submit a renewal within 30 days of the benefits closure. So those are the two timelines.
All right, team. Well, those are all the questions we received. I'll swing it back to Taylor.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming today. Again, the slides from this webinar will be sent to you. The link to the recording of the webinar will be sent to you. The answers to the Q&A will also be sent in written format. And we should have a transcript of the webinar available also. So check out your emails, keep an eye out for that. And thank you for coming.
Everybody.
Thank you all.